verbal release, like all right or okay. You may just change your position, drop your, if you have a physical cue that you're giving the animal. You know, there are oftentimes going to be other things that are associated with basically you're done, you can relax now. And remember that because we've associated the sound with a primary reinforcer, it actually does have reinforcing value. Not that you can use the whistle or the clicker all the time and never pair it with primary reinforcement, or it would lose its value. But it is a reinforcer, so you can use it alone. We had some great discussion about this with Zebra today. They're not used to working with a bridge only and no food, so it's not something that you're just going to jump right into if you have animals that are accustomed to having food after every single bridge. And again, I think it's, we'll talk about this a little bit more later. But I just wanted to show you a video of how it looks to use the bridge to say good to an animal for different components of the behavior, but food isn't necessarily given. So this is a chimpanzee who is getting his very first sub-Q injection. He was being trained as part of a study. So he's just being injected with saline now, but it's his first time. So you'll hear the whistle for all the various parts of this behavior. Good boy, hold. Good boy, hold. Okay, good boy. Good boy. Clearly he's very happy about it. Another example. This is so cute. Okay, so just a couple of examples of how that can look when you're bridging duration, bridging for various components throughout a behavior. So, as trainers, we're always deciding, everything about training is problem solving and in the moment. We make a plan, but sometimes we know things don't always go according to plan, right? So this is part of what makes us think and become better and better trainers is some of these decisions that we make as we're engaging with the animals. When do we bridge and when do we give food? That's a big decision. We know our bridging, we can accidentally reinforce things that we wish we hadn't. If we give a big jackpot at the wrong time, maybe we've reinforced the wrong thing. Of course, the flip side is we use those tools properly and we get animals that are doing great behaviors and exactly what we want. Seems to me, for me, it's usually somewhere in the middle. But with each correct behavioral response, we know we're telling the animal what they've done right. So how do we decide when to give food, how much food to give, those sorts of things? I think usually we consider the difficulty of the behavior. Is it a painful behavior? Is it a frightening behavior? And those things are all about, again, the individual animal. One animal may be very, very needle tolerant, and you don't have to jackpot with super, super good stuff for some needle behaviors. Maybe the same species, different animal is very sensitive to needles, so you're going to have small approximations and provide a high value of reinforcement for that individual. So knowledge of the tools and techniques of positive reinforcement training and knowledge of the individual are what help us make these decisions. Also, I always like to, I used always, but I do, like to assess the situation and see, is there some scary noise happening? Is there, for the chimps we were talking about yesterday, they used to, or Moses anyways, used to become upset from lawn mowing. Well, if I'm doing a training session and the lawnmower fires up, I know that I might have to up my rate of reinforcement and also what I'm giving. So when you're considering how much and what kind of food to give, and maybe how often to give it. Think about not only the difficulty of the behavior, the individual animal's sensitivities, but also what's happening in the environment. You can consider all of those things. Oh, and the social pressures, that's a big one too. Okay, so I'm just curious, I hope you're not like shy to raise your hand, but do any of you ever feel confused if you should blow your whistle or give food for something? Do you ever question that at all? I mean, I know I do.
Yeah.
And I think if you haven't experienced that yet, you just haven't gotten there. Because the more you train, I think the more you begin to understand, wow, I still have a lot to learn. Because every situation is a little bit different. So yeah, I mean, this is going to happen, and there are going to be times where you thought the animal was just about to make that whatever step or do the behavior you were hoping, and you're all ready, and you, dang it. Well, think about this, because if you accidentally blow your whistle, click your clicker, one of the lovely things about behavior is it is flexible and animals can actually be quite forgiving. So when you make a mistake like that, don't follow up with food. Even though you feel like, well, I blew the whistle, I should give them food. Well, you've just told them good for something that you really maybe wish you hadn't. And then if you follow up with food, what have you done? Said, yeah, I actually did really mean that. Now I've provided the primary reinforcement in association. So if you accidentally blow the whistle and you wish you hadn't, don't give food. Because you're only telling the animal, yes, this thing that I actually wish you hadn't done is now reinforced. So behavior's flexible, just go back and you'll be paying more attention to it next time, and you can very easily correct the situation. It's not even a problem yet if it occurs every now and again. Yes, now if this keeps happening over and over again, and you keep bridging at a time where you wish you hadn't, you certainly don't want to punish the animal for that. You need to step back and maybe think about how you're approaching that particular problem or behavior. So yeah, because this is all the information the animal has as they try to figure out what we're asking them to do. So of course we have to be consistent in our approach and the steps that we're taking in training, and that's sort of what this becomes about.
Margaret, on that issue where you accidentally bridge something, one technique that I have done in the past is not give the food, but then quickly ask for something that I know they're going to be successful. Do you think that's a good way to get yourself out of that potential frustration?
Absolutely, yeah. Yeah, find something where both you and the animal can be successful. Yeah, because you don't want to frustrate them by holding out. Yeah, and this isn't about the animal making a mistake. This is about you making a mistake. So certainly, that's what I mean. You don't want to punish the animal for your mistake, but you want to correct it before it goes on to actually become a behavioral problem. Yeah. Yeah, hit the reset button. Okay, so when we give food is really dictated by what are called schedules of reinforcement. Everybody familiar with schedules of reinforcement? There's really two. I mean, when I bring that giant book for Stacy, the art conditioning book, there are many, many types of schedules of reinforcement if you want to look through the literature. But I think from our sort of keeping it simple, for me, stupid, is think about a variable schedule and a continuous schedule of reinforcement. And those are the two schedules that I believe you'll find most useful and applicable. So a continuous schedule means every correct behavioral response gets a bit of primary reinforcement. And remember, you're going to bridge every correct behavioral response, but it's when you give that primary reinforcer that makes the schedule of reinforcement. It's a lot of reinforcement. So your continuous schedule, tweak, get food, tweak, get food. Every correct behavioral response that's bridged gets a primary reinforcement. And I think that we typically use a continuous schedule when you're training a new behavior, maybe a really difficult behavior for the animal. Perhaps when you're being introduced to working with an animal, you're going to use that continuous schedule. And I will say from what I do as a trainer, I function most often in the scope of a continuous schedule. I'll show you some, I mean, you saw the video earlier of the chimp training, and I wasn't giving him food after every single bridge because in that case it would have been disruptive to the behavior. But I will say most of the time I function within the scope of a continuous schedule. And again, this isn't rocket science, but because Matchie's tree kangaroos are some of the cutest critters, just an example of what a continuous schedule looks like.
Target. Good. Long hand. Good. Very good.
And now, Colleen made me feel like I shouldn't show Abel doing training, but again, cute baby. So he's just learning to target, and you can see every target is bridged and reinforced. His station is to touch the frisbee with his paw. So again, every correct behavioral response gets a bit of food. Okay, so then that's the continuous. On the flip side of that, we have the variable schedule of reinforcement. And this is where there's a lot of different types of variable schedules, but I think for practical purposes, if you just think of a variable schedule as delivering the food, the primary reinforcement, on a random basis. So it might be 2 in a row, then you skip 3, then you do 1, then you have 4 bridges, and then you give the food. So whatever, however you might choose to randomize it, that's appropriate for your animals. And the idea is that this kind of keeps the animal guessing when they're going to get food, so they're always trying harder and harder. And I guess that's where I feel like I prefer the continuous schedule, because I want the animal to know that they're going to get reinforced, you know. But again, like I said, with that notion, there are some times where providing the food reinforcement every single time can be disruptive. You know, like if you've got an animal turned around facing away from you and you go to throw a bit of food out and it bounces around, then it pulls the animal out of the position that you needed them in. Or chimpanzees, if you're doing semen collection and you're like wanting to jackpot the moment that you collect, that can be quite disruptive behavior, and you don't get your full sample. So there are times where a variable schedule can be helpful, but you want to think about how you ease into that if you're not currently using it. So a little bit more cuteness.
Good girl. Good. Hold. Sorry. Okay. Good. Hold. Good. Rosie paint.
So you can see she's done quite a few responses with no food.
Good girl, Rose. Good hold. Good girl. Good.
She's quite talented though. She can chew and still do behaviors.
Target. Good. Hold. Good. Paint.
All right, so I think we get the idea. So Rosie was on the, I don't know, sort of extreme side of the variable schedule. You know, there were many behavioral responses. And here you see the bear's asked to sit and target and then receives a bit of peanut butter, presents paws, things like that. So does anybody have any questions about bridging, schedules of reinforcement, that sort of thing?
Yes.
How did I know?
What do you think about the situation where you're stationing, you know, an animal for an extended period of time, you know, like in our shifting types of situations where we're holding somebody while we're getting others around? You know, what should be happening, do you think, in terms of the bridge? I mean, I think very often, you know, the food might be happening, but should we be bridging every time, or variable bridging, or not bridging at all because they're just standing there, or what's your thought on this?
I guess for me it would depend on perhaps the individual animal, how patient they are, how far into training or how much training history they have. Like for the elephants, I think you can kind of stand there and toss a bit of food down. And unless there's something in the environment that would make me want to say, yes, I need to bridge and reinforce you, then I probably wouldn't. You know, I'd be okay. I mean, I wouldn't want to just blast them with tons of food. You know, I mean, for many reasons, most captive animals are a little chubby, so we want to be careful about how we do that. And if bridging can help you feed less if you need to do that, then that might be something for consideration. But strictly from a cooperation behavior standpoint, I think you're okay to toss a bit of food. If it's an animal that is just learning to station or is very aware and sensitive of the environment, then I might feel the need to bridge more because of things that are happening. Or if a dominant animal moves by or makes a noise and that animal chooses to stay, bridge and reinforce. So again, I think the context is really important, and I don't think there's any one right or wrong.
So another example of that, that I feel like this is some time ago, I don't know if they're still doing it, that when we had the chimps kind of all on their station, at times we would just, in order to keep some on their station, just go and drop a seed in their little cup and not necessarily bridge it. So you think that is an okay thing too, if you're not trying to communicate a particular.
The chimps I actually think are a little different
Okay.
because of the fairly intense social dynamics when you've got them lined up side by side like that. I guess I was thinking of an elephant, maybe one or two when I use that for an example, and maybe the dynamics aren't as intense. But with the chimps, you know, they're all right there. You know, somebody might snarl at somebody else, and so I think the stakes are a little bit higher. So I would want to be a lot more tuned in, and especially if you're walking away from them, then to me that's even like, I'm going to step away, good for staying. And so I might want to bridge and, you know, tell them that they're good as I step away to go tend to somebody else. And that would be true with the elephants too. Anybody that I tell to stay, you're directly giving a cue, you're asking them to do something, and there should be some expectation that they'll get bridged and reinforced when you deliver a cue. If you're hanging out for an extended period of time, tossing a bit of food, to me that's a little more laid back. Was that too nebulous of an answer?
No, I
First Darren and then
Sorry, I didn't.
Yeah, I said that.
King of nebulous. So to turn that one a little bit on its head, when we're doing a behavior where we're continuously feeding throughout the behavior, so giraffes doing a foot trim or tail blood draw, something like that, I oftentimes think of that as, you know, the behavior is stay still and let us do whatever we're doing and don't react to it, and bridge for calm, cool, and collected. Do you have either a difference opinion or another idea?
No, I think you don't have to bridge every piece of food you give in that context.
Well, because they might just have a bucket or
That they're
just constantly spraying
just-
milk as
yeah.
long as they're staying
Yeah.
in a
So I think that you choose particular elements of that behavior or situation that you might want to bridge. When the needle goes in, when I cut on a bit of your hoof that's maybe a little sensitive and I know it puts pressure on you. And then you might, in fact, if the animal's just free feeding, self-reinforcing throughout that, maybe you have some special food bits that when something happens and you want to say, yes, you let that happen, then you give a little something in addition to them self-feeding. And I would only do that with an animal that's well established in the behavior. If you're in the process of training it or making sure that it's, you know, really well established, then I would think the trainer would more want to control when the food's delivered.
In that case that he gave the example of, which is exactly perfect for the giraffe and the cats as well with the milk, is there a specific, and we often just call it continuous reinforcement because that's what it seems like, but that is so similar to the continuous schedule of reinforcement theory. Is there a different type of name for that kind of, like where you're reinforcing multiples because they're holding a position? If there's none, you know, no worries. Just wondering if there
may be,
is.
and I don't know. I mean,
Okay.
I would call it, yeah, like you're just continuously feeding.
Yeah, continuous feeding. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, that's what I would say. There might be a more technical term.
Thanks.
We'll check out the big.
Okay, we'll look at the big ones.
Okay, you guys have questions.
Yeah, I was just curious more specifically for the elephants. You were talking about context and that, you know, how much experience the individual has with training. I feel like our elephants have a lot of experience with training, but a lot of the times when we are doing stationing or training, it's in high value areas like by the chute or in the chute. And so I'm wondering like where that line is drawn. How do you decide? You know, I'm sure that's like a hard question to answer. It's hard to
So
decide,
let me
but-
just make sure that I understand. So
Yeah.
you're saying that yes, the elephants have a lot of experience with training, but we're asking them to stay still and stay out of a desirable area, perhaps when another individual would go to that desirable area.
Right, or I mean, when in like specific scenario, when Donna wants to be in the chute, but someone else is going in before her, like Magunda. I personally, when I'm holding Donna, feel like I need to, you know, be more present in like a training sort of mindset with her, like ask her to move in and be really steady and give her a lot more attention. She's the dominant one, and I think we're all trained to sort of focus more on her. But I mean, that's something, I would consider a maintained behavior. It's an established behavior. They know how to station and
But it's
and all
still
that stuff.
challenging
But
for
it's
her
challenging.
because it's so tempting. So,
Right.
yeah, so I think that's an excellent point in that, you know, what are the tools that you have available to you?
Right.
You could dump a big pile of food and hope that she chooses to stay.
Right.
That would be bribing her.
Right.
You know, you're presenting the food before the behavior's done. So I know that gate's about to open and you might want to run through there, so I'm going to dump a big pile of food. Okay, I would suggest that's probably not the best technique for that scenario. You're much better to have your target available. If she looks away, you can bring her back to it. Do another behavior. You have lots of behaviors. So you're really engaging her and reinforcing her for choosing to stay there.
Right.
So I think that's a challenging situation for her, even if it's well established.
Yeah.
Lisa, she's had lots of needles stuck in her. It's still a pretty challenging thing for her.
Right.
You know, so every animal may have their own particular challenges, and knowing them and knowing what's challenging them to them will enable you to use all those tools you have in the context of positive reinforcement training to make it worth her while to stay. Yeah, so that's a great example.
A couple of slides ago, there was like a rhino that like, stuck his head through, and then
She was
like,
painting?
no, the one before that.
Oh, they did that open.
Yeah, the open mouth. And then they were like constantly bridging throughout the behavior, but then they only gave food like afterwards. Like I guess question is like what is the purpose of bridging throughout that behavior?
Telling
Especially
her good for the duration of open. Yeah. Yeah, so you say open, good, good. Yeah, and she's staying. Right. Yes.
On the note of the continuous feeding and the elephants kind of wanting to be in that place where they know they get the higher value food items, we actually had the same problem with zebras. Since we have two, we always have to both being actively fed, otherwise it's a problem. So if we only have one trainer, we'll have volunteers sit and hold one of the zebras. And we noticed a lot of the time they would start breaking because like I want to go to the trainer who will give you the good stuff. And so we started periodically having our volunteers also feed them the horse cookies, which are of higher value. So every third or fourth carrot that they get, they also get the cookie for thank you for staying here with us. Do you think that is a good way to help deal with that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think and this is important across the board, is doing nothing is super important. And I mean, it's really, doing nothing is a gross exaggeration of what's happening. That individual who's doing nothing is actually doing a heck of a lot, which is not interfering. And reinforcing non-interference is really important. You know, working with a group of monkeys or a group of whoever, somebody's always going to be dominant, somebody's always going to be subordinate. And it's almost as if, you know, the expectation you're putting a pile of food in front of them, even though it's being delivered by a volunteer, it's still not really working for food. And certainly not with proper reinforcement or timing of the reinforcement. So I think whatever it is, you gotta make it worth the animal's while to choose to do what you need it to do. And I mean, non-reinforcement or non-interference is a biggie. You know, it looks like they're doing nothing, but they're doing a heck of a lot. So, yeah. Okay, so one of the things that, like I said, I typically use a continuous schedule of reinforcement, or that stuff falling out. As long as it's not a jelly. Most of the time I do use a continuous schedule of reinforcement, but within that continuous schedule, it's best if you can have a variety of food reinforcers, and this enables you to vary what you give and how much and how delicious it is, and this is called the magnitude of reinforcement. So the magnitude of reinforcement is, you know, sort of the yummy factor, the size, the deliciousness, whatever it might be. And the more items that you can have available to you, the better you can communicate to the animals. Yeah, this is well established and easy for you, you get a bit of carrot for it. This is really hard for you and you're just learning it, you get a handful of grapes. So know what the animals like, know what the foods or reinforcers you can use, know what's available to you. Go out prepared to give the little carrot versus give the big handful of grapes. You always want to be prepared for whatever the animal may present and not have to call to somebody, can you bring me a watermelon? I want to jackpot him. You know, then you may have missed the moment. So always be prepared and try to have a variety of reinforcers. You know, working with carnivores, it can be sometimes more difficult because maybe you only have one type of meat a day, so you're sort of left with varying the size of the pieces. But if there's, you know, milk or juice, or I mean like fish juice or blood or something like that, people juice, you know, something else that you can use to vary your reinforcers, you know, that's going to be valuable for communicating to the animals. So that's the magnitude of reinforcement. And of course, the greatest magnitude of reinforcement is a jackpot.
So in the light of you want to always end on a positive note, when you jackpot, are you ending the session? Or do you
No.
continue?
So a jackpot should come as a surprise to the animal. It is, again, one of those tools that you have available when you're training. You can jackpot anytime throughout a session, and I would suggest that if you always give a nice little handful at the end of your session, it's really, you're not using it as a jackpot. You're not saying, yes, at that moment you did something fantastic, and I want you to remember this moment forever. What you're saying is, you had a nice session, I want to leave you happy. So to me, those are kind of two different things. It looks the same because it's the bigger pile of food, but how you use it is what differentiates a jackpot to say, woo, you were super fabulous in that moment, and I want you to remember this, versus I want to leave you with something nice. So kind of two different things.
Did you explain, or maybe it's my imagination, is there a difference between the magnitude of reinforcement and the jackpot?
The highest end of the greatest magnitude is the jackpot.
Okay.
So your magnitude is your yummy factors, right? So your carrot is worse than an apple, is worse than a grape, and a watermelon's the best. So a watermelon might be your jackpot item, and carrots are what we use as a lowest level of reinforcement. But they're still getting something they like, not that it's poopy.
So it might be a terminology question, because I'm in the terminology corner right here. There's a situation where you're learning, that was it, magnitude. And then there's another situation that I've used where here's something that you do fairly often, and a surprise, you get a whole bunch for this one day, just because it makes it exciting. Is there a difference in terminology for those?
I would think it's still a jackpot. You're basically in the second
Using it a different
scenario, you're just choosing something different to jackpot. Good attitude, great day, love your
Well, that was
pieces.
like, I've used it as kind of like a random, there's nothing in particular that I'm trying to focus on, it's just like more like a surprise.
But you wouldn't do it in the midst of a crummy session.
No.
So you're still gonna do
like
it during a good
fairly
session.
normal session,
Mhm.
but it's just more like a complete surprise where you suddenly get something exciting, and the idea is to make it more exciting for the animal, such that at any moment, for a nice normal behavior, you could get $1 million.
So you sort of use a variable schedule for jackpot.
Sometimes.
Thank you.
Maybe. There'd be a variable magnitude.
Yeah. Okay, so now what we really came together to talk about is reinforcements and bribes. And a reinforcement, of course, occurs in conjunction with the desired behavior, and a bribe occurs before the behavior and is used to elicit a particular behavioral response. So, you know, you want the chimp to come inside, so you put a big pile of food down, show him, here's what you're gonna get, come inside, it's here waiting for you. And the chimps always come right in for that little pile of stuff you have, right?
Not always.
This can be a drawback. Okay, so hang on to that thought, and just have a look at this. Down, good boy, sit, good boy. He's so weird. Feeding sticks are important with this guy. Scale. Scale. Good boy. Ground. That's what I talked about. So what are your thoughts on that?
She's using food as a target, so that's more baiting than it is reinforcer. That's one thing I noticed on it.
She's using food for,
As an actual target, so she's leading the animal with the food. She's not using it as a reinforcer.
she's
She's
bribing.
actually moving
Yeah.
the food to where she wants the animal, and the animal comes to it.
exactly. She also is using, what else? Hand
She's using
signals.
cues
Yeah.
along with, she's using the food as a cue along with the other cues.
Right, right. Yeah, so she's, the funny thing, I mean, she's actually quite a good trainer. This animal, this was at the Dallas Zoo many years ago. He had trained many, many people. He was well experienced and knew just how to do it. He was also a fairly aggressive cat. One time when he had a little walkabout, he actually came back to his target, much to everybody's surprise. But he was a pretty neat cat. But when I took this video and showed it to the trainer, I said, "You see what you're doing with the meat stick?" She was like, "Holy crap! Oh my gosh! I never even noticed that." I said, "Yeah," because he actually does everything on hand signals. But you know, she was just moving up and down and over here and around with her hand signal and with the meat stick. So I think it's a good example of several things. One, you do see that he's looking at the food and moving with the food. Two, how important it can be to videotape yourself and have a look at it and, you know, be your own critic before we put you up on the big screen here. I think it's always I don't know, humbling for me to watch myself train, because I always think, good God, what am I doing there? I learned very early on watching myself train sea lions, which were the first animals I learned to train on, that when I would bridge, I would do this little jump. I don't know, I was just excited, oh my God, they're doing it! And then when I saw myself videoed, I was horrified. Like, that was ridiculous looking for one thing, and is the animal now interpreting this as part of the bridge? So videoing yourself is a really valuable tool. So if you have the opportunity, go ahead and do that and have a look at what you're doing. It can be a very good teaching tool. Just the other thing, once we tried for this cat without the meat stick going along everywhere, he actually did fine. So, yes, Colin.
Can you speak to the downside of this? Because, it also was working, and, it's very common these days, way of training, pet owners, dog owners. Positive reinforcement training in the dog world is almost exclusively that method.
Taking
But
the
what-
food to drive it.
Yeah, that
Yeah.
you're basically moving them into the position, and I think that, the goal that they teach people is to phase it out
Right.
and then go to the hand signals. But what do you find to be the bad side or the downside of using food as a lure, either initially or in that?
Yeah, so let me get through these couple of slides and talk about some of those points, and then come back to what the drawbacks are. So, I don't know if, for those of you that have been out in zoo training, the zoo training world, have encountered other people, they're like, oh, well, they're bribing, and somehow like look down your nose upon somebody who bribes. And some very like, I don't know, I guess like hardcore kind of people might feel that way. But I do think that bribes can be a helpful tool. It's not where you want to end up, like Colleen was just asking about. But it can be a good way to initiate some behaviors or to help you through some struggles. But I think that, one, you have to say, my name's Margaret and I use bribes. Come to your 12-step program to get rid of bribes. But recognize that, that's not quite a good analogy. But anyway, it can be an okay way to start, but recognize what you're doing. Don't be ashamed of it, own up to it, and have a plan to help yourself eliminate the bribe. And you want to do it as quickly as possible. So, when you're using a bribe, if you're going to throw the piece of food to get the animal to move, be prepared to bridge and reinforce. And one thing that's helpful is to make sure your food reinforcer is of greater value, higher magnitude than your bribe. Because then the animal's like, oh, I actually got the good stuff when I did it, not I'm going to hold out and you're going to have to put more and more down to make it happen. So make a shaping plan that includes a bribe. Identify what your food reinforcers will be, identify what your cue is going to be, use your hand signal or verbal or whatever it is right from the get-go, and then work very hard to replace that bribe with just the cue. So a behavior that's super easy for most animals to bribe is an open mouth. So maybe we've got the, whoa, shoes just got tied together. Maybe you've got the animal who's willing to open their mouth for food, so you can use the food, hold it there, they open their mouth, and like with a lot of animals, we'll hold the food and the cue together, and then just slowly start to pull the food back, and then you have them just doing the behavior for the cue. Backup behavior with an elephant, or with any animal, super easy to teach. Throw the food, hopefully you have a good shot. You're saying back and tie, telling the animal to move backwards. And then when he gets there, he's bridged, or as he's going backwards, he's bridged, and more food comes out. And then in the end, what you're going to have is something that looks like this eventually. You get the animal in position, and the backup cue is still similar to throwing the food away, or throwing the food to her. There we go, back. So you can see how that backup cue would have come from throwing the food. So it's pretty easy to replace the food toss with the cue. And again, this kind of gets back to what we were talking about with understanding where cues come from with your targets. You know, sometimes if you know how that cue emerged, it can be helpful if you have to problem solve if there's a breakdown in behavior. Okay, another example of, before I get on to all the examples, kind of getting back to Colleen's point about the drawbacks of bribing. I think the biggest drawbacks are we become dependent on them, and the animals, you know, these animals are way smarter than I am most of the time, and they'll kind of look and go, oh, you got a banana over there. Okay, I'll come get it. And then the next day you're in a big hurry and you need that animal to move. So you put a banana down and they look at it and like, not just yet. And you're in a hurry, so you put a couple more bananas down and they're like, oh, sweet. I stay here a little longer and you put more stuff down. So now, you know, it's a trap that we all fall into if you claim you haven't. I don't believe you. Or you're just too new. You haven't done it yet. I mean, we've all done it. And that's where bribing can be really dangerous because the animals are way smarter than us. They have way more time than we do. And so they learn that they can hold out, and eventually we're going to put more stuff down or just give up and dump their whole diet down and walk away. And then they've really scored. So we've really jackpotted things that we shouldn't. So that's probably the biggest drawback of bribing, is that the animals flip it around and really tool us. And the other is not having a good enough plan in place to fade out the bribe, kind of having all those pieces ahead of time, and then just having the courage to go ahead and do it. You know, don't be afraid to fade out your bribe. At some point you have to do it. Oh, one important bit that I forgot was, like, take the elephant backing up, for example. The first time you say back up, and you can even do the little boo, fake check, the first time you do it without the bribe, and the animal takes one step, bridge and reinforce them. If for the bribe they're taking 10 steps back, when I don't throw down that bribe and they take even a step, yes, I'm going to bridge and pay you for that. Because you've changed a part of how you're asking for this behavior in a very significant way. So you want to, you know, lower the some criteria with the behavior. So think about that as well. Okay, a couple of other examples. This is this little squirrel monkey totally being bribed into his cage, a little catch cage. And, you know, he comes right in. He seems fine with that.
You know where you're sorted, are you?
So that's what the bribe part of it looks like. And then we use the bribe to begin desensitizing him. To the door being closed.
So it doesn't all come down really easily. I'm not going to mess with that today, not on the first day.
And now you can see he's actually being asked to come inside rather than being given food first. So that's more of the cue, bridge and reinforce. Hard to tell the whistle from the squeaky monkey. And a little desensitization, moving the door, bridging and providing the food reinforcement. All right, this is a really nice example of bribing. Again, open mouth behavior, super easy to bribe. So she's got a cookie in her hand and she's going to say open. And of course the bear is quite willing to open his mouth. Okay, so that's what it looks like with bribing. And then here, she's got no cookie in her mouth and a very easy transition. Oh, stop it.
Oh, God. Why is she looking at me? Those are others in my eyes.
Now,
oh, God, I'm going to be like a lot longer and a lot skinnier.
1980 videos.
I don't know how you do it. I'm like, no, I'm not.
So, yeah, we were working on otter open.
Oh, yeah. Is it ginger?
Anyways, we were working on open mouth with the otter. You know, bear, yeah, man, all over my mouth. Pretty lamb sitting here, you know, what bears do. He's just like completely chilled out sitting there. Compared to the otter, oh my God, you want me to open mouth? Can you even bridge a time? How did that? So, have a look at what that's like. Completely different feeling.
Ew, now it's my voice.
So you can see she's got the food there, giving the open cue, and I mean the open is like, this is tough timing. This requires a good deal of skill with your bridge. You see it?
Yeah.
Nice jackpot for that little bitty open. Here, let's look at it again. There it is.
I would measure how open it was based on how much of the canines I could see. Like, did I get past the lower teeth? Did I get to a tip of a canine? And that's how I would tell how much to feed. I'd be like, okay, it's because it's hard to appreciate how open their mouth is.
It's so tiny and fast. And that's an excellent point, like figuring out what your gauge is going to be. So, you know, for this behavior, it can be really fast with some animals, and man, you got to be good with your bridge and get that timing in there. And again, I remember some of them that were like, oh, I shouldn't have whistled. So we just
Definitely, they're
move
like, lots of fake outs.
Fake out.
And you have to be, definitely have to anticipate a lot. Lots of anticipating that open. Otherwise, the timing would have been way off.
Yeah. So those are just a few examples of behaviors that you can bribe. And we just have a few minutes left. So any other questions or comments, or do you have concerns about becoming dependent on bribes and how to work out of it or anything like that? Because that is the biggest problem with it.
So when we station the elephants in and out of the chute, we have one trainer that's stationing 2 other elephants up the hillside, and then there's the one trainer with the elephant in the chute. Lets the elephant out, we have to open up the bull yard, and then we now walk the elephants out. So we just call them, the trainer walks out, we wait for the elephants to come to us, then they get reinforced. So my question is, are we bribing them with our bodies? I mean, we have to hold the bucket because we've got the food in the bucket, but the desired behavior is to come into the bull yard.
Yeah, I mean, they
come
don't
to
get
me.
you, hopefully, or the food until they come out. So you're reinforcing.
Okay.
And I mean, it's also, that's one of those that's so routine that there is an expectation that the gate's going to open and I'm going to walk here and you're going to be there to give me something. So they have an expectation that they're going to get something. If you were to change the behavior to an act like a go, then it might be that you would tell them go, they turn, they take a few steps, and you throw some food.
We do that sometimes.
But they're still
too.
getting reinforced for that turn and leave, or some part of that movement. So, I suppose you could always say, well, the animals are being bribed to work if you want to get anal about it, because they might look in your pouch and see what food you have, or, and they're like, well, no, I don't really like what you have today. And if you go back and get more, then that could be kind of a dangerous cycle of having them check out what you have. But that's why I like to show up with everything in my pouch if I can.
Well, I think one thing that it made me think about is how that's the exact sort of thing I was thinking of, is there's so many situations where, you can't really hide what you have, especially with some of the larger animals. You're not going to put it under your t-shirt or something. But maybe like with the elephant situation, you guys could have a much smaller pouch that had like sweet feed in it. And maybe most days you don't use it at all. But, with some sort of exceptional response, or Leslie's, oh my God, you just had a great morning for no reason. You can do something like that.
Yeah.
My question on you touched on it with your chimp example, and I think we have a lot of these situations when, we're shifting animals into a space that already has their diet down. How do you address that shifting issue when, it would be difficult to get them to diet, without already having it down before they enter?
I guess there's a couple of ways that you could do it. First off, I would train it outside the scope of that shifting time when the food's already down. So train the behavior outside of that time. And then always be prepared to reinforce them even if their food's down. So it's still a behavior that's under stimulus control. So you're still saying shift, bridge, reinforce with maybe a tiny bit of something special that isn't in their diet, or if they've got, you know, some yummy thing in their diet, you could just use that as the reinforcement.
How do you feel about continuously upping the value of the reward based on the, I guess, not necessarily the breakdown of an established behavior, but like for example, this winter we had a really rough winter weather-wise, and the elephants sometimes did not want to shift and go up on the exhibit because it was crummy conditions. So we were concerned that if we kept upping, like increasing the value of our reinforcer, that at some point we'd hit a plateau. So how do you prevent that from happening when those conditions are, you know, you can't really reset or control those outer, you know, things.
I think, yeah, then, you know, and I guess I would probably do the same thing, that if I knew there was some external factor that was going to make it more challenging for the animal to do the behavior, I'm going to up the reinforcement, whether that's the rate or the magnitude.
Okay.
So if you're giving more or better stuff or more frequent bridges, you know, maybe you can do, instead of calling the animal from A to B, and A to B is a really big distance, you have intermediate points to reinforce them. So I think there's a variety of ways to do, for that particular scenario, there's a variety of ways to do it, and I think probably the best way to avoid all the potential downfalls are to mix up those techniques.
Okay.
So sometimes you get frequent reinforcement along the way, sometimes you get something really great at the end, or somewhere in between. Or we're going to spend a lot of time with you and do, instead of shutting the door, saying you're up there and leaving, which sometimes can be, you know, something the animals don't want, is we shut the door, we're going to stay up here and hang out and do whatever it is that might be fun for that animal. So that your presence can be reinforcing. Because, you know, with shifting, a lot of times we shift the animal, we shut the door, and we go home. Opportunity removed. I mean, maybe they have a room full of lots of nice stuff, but, you know, some of them like to interact with us, we hope. And so think about that as a way to provide an additional level of reinforcement.
So, I guess, I don't know if this is going to be phrased as a question or not, but I think in some of the scenarios, the fine line of cueing and baiting, because of exactly what Colleen said, giraffes can see in your bucket, and the tigers can smell what you have. You're still cueing, or, you know, maybe you're not, but you should be still cueing, but you're almost kind of dancing the line of baiting because they do know what you have. Like, do you have any?
But I think, well, I mean, I think it's unavoidable unless you're going to cover your food. And I guess I don't really feel the need, me personally, I don't feel the need to hide what they're going to get for a regular training session, because they should get something that they like. That doesn't mean that you keep making it better and better. You're not going to go out with a bucket of M&Ms, you know, because they've been snobby about it and said, I'm not going to work for this and I'm not going to work for that. You know, you still have to say, well, no, you are going to work for the carrot for that behavior, and you get the, I don't know, apple for this other one. So, and again, if you have a variety of stuff in your bucket, then even if they look at it, they don't know that they're going to get a carrot for this or a loaf of bread for that. So I think that's where it's good to have.
Just wherever you can find your variety, like you said, with the even if it's in the size of the meat.
And I mean, you don't come to work wondering if you're going to get paid. You know,
Yeah.
you know that there is something predictable. There is an expectation.
Okay.
So I think that that's fair, that they expect they're going to get something. When it becomes a problem is if you keep adding better and better stuff. And they're going, no. Now, I do see all y'all's hands, on the sort of, on that same line of thinking, you know, would it be an interesting thing to offer an animal a choice? Do you want to work for these or these today? And would you get higher motivation if you give them the choice instead of you making those choices for them? And their tastes change. I mean, we've done some experiments with monkeys and preference testing, and you know, we know that their tastes change. They don't want the same thing every single day. And so I think just kind of, again, being prepared and responsive to what they might want, as long as it's not ice cream all day long. Yes.
Would another divider between the bucket be, like, you know, for the tigers and giraffes, would another divider between bribe and cueing and reinforcing be that they don't necessarily know how much they're going to get? Like, you hold up a piece of banana and you're like, here's your banana from this bucket, come get it, versus like, they could come up and then you give them 5 pieces of banana once they come up, or you hold 5 pieces, like.
Yeah, I mean, if what you just described, holding the food up and waving it, absolutely, that's bribing. If you've got your bucket with you because you at some point have the hope that you're gonna get a good behavior you wanna reinforce, to me, that's not really bribing, that's just going out ready to write the check.
And I think with the bucket too, you also have the opportunity to not reinforce.
Right, exactly. Yeah, you don't have to do it.
Yeah.
The bribe is, it's already there, and they can get it. Somebody else had their hand up over here.
I was going to add to Stacy's comment that, you know, kind of, well, they can see into your bucket, and so how can you hide it and that kind of thing. Well, I think, you know, that's still a human's perspective of saying, well, I either have food on me or I don't, so they must know if I don't have it on me, I don't have it. But, I mean, I've been in a lot of situations where I've had a behavior that I built with one individual where all I needed to do was walk towards her and she goes, are we doing it? You know, like, I become the cue. I don't necessarily have food with me, but it's so ingrained. I think sometimes we get really focused on going, well, I don't have a bucket or I do, so they know they're training or they're not, but there's so many other cues we're giving them. You know, we're wearing our whistle, but normally we don't. You know, so those are some of the things I think if we get too focused on trying to hide the foods they don't know what they're going to get, they probably already know that we're going to train them otherwise. So then we're just kind of getting tied up in this kind of semantic part of it. But I think, yeah, with the giraffe, they see in your bucket, so
Yeah.
you can't really hide that.
Yeah, and I don't think you need to.
Yeah.
I mean, it's kind of what you do. If you're shaking your bucket, and you know, you can get all kinds of. I mean, shaking your bucket can become a cue. Again, they don't have the food with them. It's just another auditory cue. That means, hey, it's time to earn some good stuff. If you come here, you earn it. You're not getting it before you come here.
Well, I think that goes back to sort of the discussion we were having yesterday too about, are they earning the good stuff, or is training session just another time when they're going to get exactly the same good stuff that they're getting for free in their diet? And I think that's something where we've seen some success with some of our species where, you know, we've pulled out some of the favorite items from the diet. I think Stephanie was talking about it yesterday, but you know, we've seen some good improvements in some of our training, you know, when we've said, hey, you love grapes? Okay, great. Grapes, you know, it's in your diet, but you're not going to get it as a diet item. You're going to get it in a training or maybe enrichment item. You know, I think there's definitely still some species where we could address that because we have, you know, kind of up the ante where they're getting what would be, you know, the good stuff for free for many other times during the day.
Yeah. And again, we know animals want to work for food. So to me, they shouldn't just be given a pile of food. It should be provided in some sort of enriching way, be it training or some other enriching way.
We probably need to finish since we're tied after, but thank you very much.